So this is the second post-workshop recording for the Pivot program. And in this workshop, what we're going over is the creation of branches in GitHub and your local Git repo as well. So in the previous workshop, we covered just how to get here, how to create a Git repo, how to, I think we went up to commit number 2 here on main, just pushing some changes ahead and storing those. So what this week was all about is working under the assumption that main is your production code. That's the code that is going to go to your customers. That's the code that's going to go on your fleet of robotic vehicles in the case of our program. And if you're always sending your changes to the main branch, then, for example, let's say you write some code and it breaks some functionality somewhere, or it's not ready for use on the actual production code, then you have an issue. You're pushing to everyone who's using your code. So we're solving this problem by isolating our development into a separate branch. And you should just have the main branch. We ran through this in the workshop, so I have a second branch, but we're going to cover how to create a second branch or as many branches as you want from GitHub. Get it onto your local system. So let's actually navigate to our local system. I can workspace and then my first Git repo, and we can check the status. We're on branch test, so let me just check out main. Uh, Probably should have done this before the recording, but you should see when you type git status, you should see on branch main. I did just kind of cover one of our commands from today there. But yeah, if I check history here, git log one line, you'll see I have some notes. You'll actually see this is outdated versus main on here. Because this has 3 commits. Locally, I have 2. We'll talk about that. But the idea is here to have um, your production branch, your main branch, um, to be like where you send your programs to once they're ready, once they've been tested, once they've been vetted. And if you've heard of like the software development process, you may be familiar with the concept of, having a code review with um, a higher level software engineer or your manager, where they overview kind of, hey, this is what you're going to commit to our project. Is it good to go or not? And like, how do we formalize that? So we're going to cover all of that with the whole creating another branch. And to start that process of creating another branch, you're going to want to go to your Git repo in GitHub. Then you're going to want to go to the branches section, go to new branch, and then let's call this second text file. It's just an example. And then the source is going to be the main branch. But notice that I could set it to other things if I have that. So what this is basically saying for the source is up until the current status of main or whatever branch, build off of that. And so we're going to create this new branch called second text file. And then now we have that here in GitHub. You can see 3 branches now. You might see just 2. And if I click on it, I can switch to it. It'll tell me whether it's up to date with main. It'll tell me what the commits are. It's going to be the same exact thing as main because we haven't pushed any code here. But now we can work off of this branch instead of main. And to do that, we can go back to our Git repo locally and then say, hey, I'm going to pull from GitHub Um, yeah, mm, uh, mm, okay, this one, pivot. And so with that, you'll see you can ignore the stuff up here for now. We'll talk about that later, but you could see in this section from my Git repo, it pulled this new branch, second text file from the origin, which is the cloud GitHub, and a second text file. And that means that now, if I check branches, it's not there, but if I check it out, it'll check that relation to the cloud and allow me to do it. So I can say git checkout second text file. Whoops, file. And now I have that second text file branch locally. And so I can go back and forth checking out branches. Let me clear this. So you could see on git branch, I have these three branches. You might just have two. And if I wanted to go back to editing the main branch, I could say git checkout main. I could also git checkout git branch to check and look at that. I'm on main. It's highlighted. But let's go back to second text file. And so clear this. So now let's say I want to, like the name implies of my branch. No, you want to name your branch as something relevant to what you're working on. So let's say I want to add a second text file. So I'll touch text or file 2.txt. There it is in the IDE. Let me go to in the IDE and type example of a branch. And then I can close that, save and close that. And I can say, okay, what's the status? I'm on branch second text file, and now there's changes to it. I can load those changes, commit them. This is just our workflow from last week. Let's say, second, um, file.txt contents. If you get this, this is related to the system we're using. These changes aren't persistent, so just kind of going back into last week's contents of config, your username and your email, and it's suggested in that error. And that is just because Git will refuse to like commit your changes if it doesn't know who it's attributing those changes to. So this is just telling it, oh, like the person who created this code is your name and your email. And so then we can go back to committing. Now it lets us. And perfect. So now we can push. But we want to make sure we're not pushing to main. So we're going to type git push. Normally that would be it, but you would type origin now, which is just implies, okay, I'm sending this now to the cloud somewhere. And then you could type the name of your branch afterwards. So it's going to be second text file. My password is this token. And then if I go here, second text file headers and pushes, I can say, okay, let me view those. Oh, look at that. I have my second text file. And the interesting thing about that is if I go back to the main branch, hey, that file's not there. And it'll tell me that, somewhere second text branch deviated. I have three commits in main. And if I check second text file, I should have four. So I should have that additional one I made. And so now you can see, okay, well, you isolated your software development to this branch. And this is a pretty powerful thing to do because um, if you're working in a team and you're all working on different functionality, This allows you to isolate your work. And then at the end, when you're ready to put it into the shared like software, you can bring that into main. And so to bring it into a different branch, let's say we like these changes, we approve of them, we want to put them into the main branch. You can do a compare and pull request, just generally a pull request. Before we get into that, let's just add some training wheels for this program. Let's go to settings, and then scroll down to pull requests. Disable, you'll probably have these enabled by default. So disable merge, allow merge commits, disable allow rebase merging, and just leave allow squash merging. You can save those changes. You could also change your visibility. I have it set to private, but you could just set it change to public if you'd like other people to view this repo. And just kind of coming back now, once we have those, we could just click this button and expedite some of this process. We're going to do this a little bit the long way. So we're going to go to pull requests. We're going to say, I closed one earlier during the workshop, but this is a post recording. We're going to go to new pull request. And what a pull request is it's basically saying, hey, I want to start this software review process and get this checked by someone and then um, get it merged into another branch. And you could see by default, it's the main branch, but you could set it to other branches. Like, so for example, if second text file had branched off of test, you could merge into test. And so then that lets you do other things like on a high level, let's say, okay, main is your production code. You might have a perception branch, and then under that perception branch, there's different things like about robot perception. Maybe there's a branch for image manipulation. Maybe there's a branch for use for training a classifier. Whatever that may be, you could compile that work together when it's ready into the perception branch and then bring that into main when that's ready. So, um, and you'll be able to switch between those branches as you do your software development. So you could always see where like the stages of things are across a team's project. You could check out their current work and just work off of that or run something that they've been developing and that's still in development. So base is going to be main in this case because we're going to want to move this new text file into main. We're going to compare it against second text file and it's going to say, oh, hey, these are your changes. You added a text file with this content. And so we're just going to click create pull request. You could give it a title, you could give it a description. We're going to create that pull request. Um, and then this allows you to say, hey, I want to add reviewers. You could add like your team lead, your manager, other software engineers on your team, just coworkers, people to like give this a second glance and say, hey, this looks good to me, or oh, it would be nice if you refactored, if you made these changes, if you corrected this logic that I think is going to cause a bug. Um, as you get deeper into this, you might be asked to run some unit tests. You could also add assignees. So if multiple people are working on something, it could be more than one. You could add a project if that's relevant, milestones, lots of stuff. And in this comment section, the first view of a pull request, we can back out into it and see this is the one we just created. So you can always like click and go back in and out. Um, the first thing you'll see is this conversation side, which is like where all of those comments would go. So you might assign a reviewer to be your manager, and they might give you a comment like, okay, this is good to go, or hey, I want these changes. You could also see, the commits related to that, the history of commits. You could see, if you want to enable some additional checks. And this GitHub Actions is continuous integration and deployment. This is where you may have like tests sitting to run your code against. But that's a pretty advanced concept. And then um, your last thing would be just what changed, and that's stored here, and the files changed. So going back to conversation, let's say we assigned this to a reviewer, they said it's all good to go. Now we're ready to put it into the main branch. It's going to go from second text file up here into main. So we can just click squash and merge. You can name it again, whatever you'd like. I'll confirm that. The name isn't super important here. And look at that. Now it's been merged into main. What does that mean? That means if we go back to this branch, um, in main, well, we were on second text file. So second text file had those four commits as opposed to three. We go to main, kind of a spoiler earlier, but you can see now we have that second text file. So just like that, we brought the changes in. Now this is assuming ideal conditions, it's one team, one person working on something, but you'll eventually run into the situation just kind of where all of this came in. Hey, are you rebasing? Fast forward. Like, what's your merge strategy? Once you start working in a team, the best place to learn this is actually developing software. Once you start to work with a team, you'll run into conflicts merging your software because let's say you were working off some software that existed on a branch, and then someone else deleted some of that software or edited the logic inside of it. And now you both try to bring together your changes. Um, well, hey, they're trying to bring in something that says that software doesn't exist anymore. So how do you address that if you're pulling it together in the same place? And that's where some of these strategies could come in. Or you could even manually go through and um, choose what to keep and what to throw out. But yeah, with this, you can now isolate your work into a separate branch and then pull it into the production code. And that's really a huge step in the direction of becoming uh, a software engineer that could do work in a team. With this, you can start to pull together team projects and track your work in an effective way. And if at any point you decide, oh, hey, we made all these changes to our program and now we don't really like it. We talked about that checkout command. Something interesting, and let me just get like a nice terminal here to view it, is if we check our Git log, oh, hey, we have all of these commits. We've checked out branches, but hey, all of these commits are associated with these codes, right? So what if I say git checkout and let me put in this second commit, say E67A057. Oh, it switched. I'm in a detached head state. If I check my logs, oh look at that. I only have the two. And I actually have that, like that second text file is gone. So I could always go back to a previous commit to do some work, or even revert in, it's a little more of an involved process, but revert on GitHub. And that's part of why version control is again powerful. You know, add new features, take away things that didn't work. You can go back and forth. If you introduce a bug to your program that's pretty serious, you can go back to a stable version of your software. And you can always check out main. And it switches it back. And then let's see, git log. Um, and so that's another interesting thing. Main on the local git is missing that fourth commit, right? It's still on three. And you can see that there's supposed to be four. So that's the other thing about branches and the software development workflow that's worth mentioning here is just because you have something in the cloud, like we pulled in that change on the cloud, doesn't mean it's going to get immediately reflected locally. So in order to actually get it reflected locally, you just have to type git and your username and password. Let's get that here. Um, and okay, now we have it. And if we check the logs again, okay, there's that fourth one. So I would get into the habit as just a kind of final point to round out this recording on Git branches. I would always, especially if you're working in a team, at the beginning of your workflow, when you're logging into your computer and getting ready to do your software development, um, you could type git pull and just make sure that you have the latest version of the branches on the team locally on your machine before you start doing work, and then you realize that's when you'll get into another conflict to have to sort out and implement different strategies on. And those are always good for learning, but if you want to avoid them, type git pull, make sure there's no changes that you're not expecting, because if you start working on something out of date, um, then you try to push your changes, it's going to reject them. It's going to say, well, you're so many commits behind the actual origin or the cloud. So how do you want to resolve this? And then you have to go through that debugging process. Okay, so that's it as far as Git. Um, with this, you could um, you could do a lot of interesting software development work. And I'm realizing now that I already have pivot here. So let me go into this branch and then remove pivot as examples. Okay, so this is probably what you would have. You'd have a clean source folder. Um, actually, remove it from here as well. So this is really what you would have. Um, so what we're going to learn next as far as GitHub goes is what about, okay, so this is a cloud storage system. What if I want to put my software on different devices or put someone else's software on my device? Well, what GitHub allows you to do is say, hey, I'm gonna make a clone locally of the stuff that's on the cloud. And that way I can push and pull from it. So I'm gonna take this link from the green code button, HTTPS. This is a different repo that I'm going to be providing for this program. And then let's say we want to put it in the source folder. Let me clear so we have some space. I could type git clone. And now if I check my source folder, there we go. I have pivot. Another thing, just bouncing off of the Linux course content, if we check out this pivot, we live, take a look inside. Um, might have learned this command ls. Okay, there's only the file. That's what I have here. Not really much in here. But if I check the hidden files, oh, there's this .git. That's interesting. And let's say what's in .git. Oh, lots of stuff, right? So this is your hidden Git folder that contains those branches and the configuration of your Git repo and references. Lots of stuff that lets you um, actually use Git. So pretty important branch. This gets created whenever you create a local Git repo. And if you clone one, like we just did, it's something that gets brought in, even though it's invisible. You don't see it. It's somewhere there in the background as a hidden file. So that's worth mentioning. Um, and the last thing is if you wanted to, for example, um, work off of a different repo. So let's say I go online and I find a check GitHub. Uh, yeah, let's say this one. Here's an interesting one. Let's say this is just a collection of stuff of information, but let's say this is a Git repo I want to, use some program from and then build off of it. Well, if I clone it directly, I don't own this repo, it's owned by this user. Um, but if I clone it directly and I make any changes, I can't actually push it to his GitHub because there would be issues with permissions and they probably wouldn't appreciate that unless it's approved work. So the way you get like open source software on your computer and then make changes to it and then put it somewhere is you create a fork. So say I found any GitHub page I want. I can go to creating a fork. It'll run me through a prompt. I can say, okay, I'm the owner. What's the repo name? You can name it whatever you want, give it whatever description you want. You could choose to copy all of the branches or copy the master only. And then let's say I create a fork. It's forking it, right? It takes a little bit. And now I have my own version of it under my account that will have a clause that says it's forked from someone else. So I can just like say pass it on as my work. It'll contain their commits. And let's say I go to clone it now. It's under my GitHub. I can now push changes to it. And when I create a pull request, I won't go through this process because this is more involved for the sake of this workshop. But once I create a pull request, I would have the option to send it to my local branches or also the original branches we forked off of. I could send a pull request to the author, this guy or girl, and I could send them a request to say, hey, I wrote some neat code for your software. Maybe you want to take a look at it and see if this is a feature or a change or a fix that you want to accept. And that's really where this whole concept of open source software comes in, of people helping each other. And this may be the process you follow at work, it may not. At work, you may just be part of a team or community in GitHub associated with your company that gives you permission to edit the repos that are contained within that team or community. So with that, you actually have now the ability to, isolate your work into branches, pull them in with pull requests into the master branch or production code, and even work off of other people's repos in the workflow. And that's pretty powerful. That lets you do this is honestly like what you need for most of software development as far as version control goes. The real learning as far as, the actual practice of using version control from here on out is mostly going to be the how do I solve conflicts when they appear. And that's a skill that you can learn a little bit from content like this, but you'll definitely learn the most just running into some issues on your own and then being like, I never want to do that again. But yeah, that's it. So I hope you've enjoyed this workshop, and I'll see you in the next one.